In a narrow corner of an old American town where shiny new tech stores had replaced bookshops and cafes, there stood a tiny shop with a faded wooden sign that read, "Henry's Timepieces, since 1968. Inside, among shelves lined with pocket watches and cuckoo clocks, sat Henry, an elderly watchmaker whose fingers had once danced gracefully over gears and springs. But now, his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted tiny screws under the dim light of his lamp. His world was small, just the rhythmic ticking of a dozen clocks, and the hum of a city that had long forgotten him. The people who once brought him their watches for repair now checked time on glowing screens. His craft, once respected, had become a relic of the past. Each morning, Henry brewed the same pot of black coffee, unlocked his door, and waited. Some days no one came. On others, a few curious tourists would step inside, take photos of the vintage shop, and leave without buying anything. When night fell, Henry would close the door and whisper, "Another day gone," to the wall of ticking clocks. They answered only with mechanical indifference. He used to believe that fixing watches was a way to keep people connected, to moments, to memories, to life. But now, as his reflection stared back at him from the shop window, he wondered if time had moved on without him. One cold November evening, as he packed away his tools, he sighed softly and said, "Maybe tomorrow. I'll stop opening the shop." But tomorrow, as time would prove, still had one more story waiting for him. The next morning, the sky hung heavy with clouds, and a soft drizzle tapped against the shop window. Henry sat behind his counter, half lost in thought, turning a small screwdriver between his fingers. It had been 3 days since a customer last entered. The clocks ticked around him, marking every lonely second that passed. Then, just before noon, the doorbell chimed, a sound so rare these days that Henry almost dropped his tool. He looked up to see a young boy, perhaps 12 or 13, standing hesitantly in the doorway. The boy's clothes were a little worn, and his sneakers squeaked against the wooden floor. In his hand, he held something wrapped carefully in a piece of old cloth. "Sir," the boy said softly, stepping closer to the counter, "I heard you fix watches." Henry nodded. "Used to. What do you have there?" The boy unwrapped the cloth to reveal a small silver pocket watch, scratched and dull from years of use. Its glass face was cracked, and one of the hands had fallen loose. Henry gently picked it up and turned it over. The initials TW were engraved on the back. "It belonged to my dad," the boy said. His voice trembled slightly. He passed away last year. I found this in his drawer. It doesn't tick anymore." Henry looked at the watch again, carefully, respectfully. He could feel the faint weight of history in it, the kind of love that lingered in old things. "I'll see what I can do," he said quietly. The boy smiled for the first time and handed over a few crumpled bills. Henry shook his head. "No charge. Some things deserve to be fixed, because they matter." As the boy left, Henry turned the little watch over once more, noticing something odd. Its internal design, its gears, its small hand-cut screws. They looked strangely familiar, almost like his own work. And then a quiet memory stirred, of another pocket watch, made decades ago, for a young man who had left home and never written back. His heart gave a slow, aching beat. Henry placed the little silver watch under his magnifying lens and began working with quiet precision. As he opened the back cover, the smell of old brass and oil filled the air, a scent he had lived with for decades. But this watch felt different. The craftsmanship was familiar in a way that made his chest tighten. The grooves on the gears, the slight tilt of the spring. He had seen this work before. His trembling hands slowed. He adjusted the lens closer, and there, etched faintly inside the casing, were 3 tiny letters. H.E.W. Henry's initials. He froze. His breath caught as time seemed to fold in on itself. He had made this watch. He remembered the night vividly now, how his son, Tommy, had stood beside him in the shop all those years ago, watching as he engraved the initials with care. "It's for your graduation," Henry had said proudly, handing it to him the next morning. "So you'll always carry a piece of time from me." But life had moved faster than either of them expected. Tommy had left town soon after, chasing dreams of a bigger life in the city. The phone calls had grown fewer, then stopped altogether. The silence between them stretched for decades. Henry had spent years pretending it didn't hurt, that the shop kept him busy enough to forget. But now, holding this watch again, all the years he tried to ignore came flooding back. His throat burned, his eyes blurred. He whispered to the empty room, "You kept it, didn't you, son?" As the clocks around him ticked in soft unison, he realized something deeper. The boy who had brought this watch must be Tommy's son, his grandson. The thought sent a quiet tremor through his heart. He looked at the half-fixed gears and murmured, "Looks like time has brought you home after all." Henry sat back in his chair, a faint, bittersweet smile on his lips. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. That night, Henry didn't close the shop at his usual hour. The lamps glowed warmly as the rain outside whispered against the window. On his workbench, the small pocket watch lay open like a patient waiting for healing. Every tick from the surrounding clocks seemed to echo a heartbeat. Slow, steady, alive. Henry adjusted his glasses and began to work. Each screw he tightened, each spring he aligned, felt like stitching together fragments of his own life. His eyes softened as he remembered his son's laughter, the way Tommy used to tap his foot impatiently, begging to go play outside while Henry worked. "Patience," he used to tell him. "Time rewards those who respect it." He hadn't realized until this moment that he'd stopped respecting it himself, treating each day as something to endure, not appreciate. Now, with every careful movement, he whispered silent apologies. "I should have called," he muttered. "Should have written. Should have said I was proud." A single tear fell onto the table, leaving a tiny mark near the watch. Henry smiled through it. "Guess even time leaves traces," he said softly. When he finally replaced the last screw and wound the key, the old watch came to life with a faint, rhythmic tick. Tick, tick. The sound filled the shop, gentle yet powerful, like forgiveness wrapped in sound. Henry closed his eyes and listened. For the first time in years, it wasn't just noise, it was peace. He cleaned the casing, polished it to a gentle shine, and rewrapped it carefully in the same cloth the boy had brought. Before turning off the lamp, Henry placed his own note inside. "Your father made this with me." He carried it with love. "May it remind you that time never forgets love. It only waits for us to remember." As the lights dimmed, Henry sat in the golden glow of his shop, the ticking of the watch blending with the sound of rain, 2 rhythms in perfect harmony. Tomorrow, he thought, the boy would return, and maybe, just maybe, Time would give him a second chance. The following morning, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Golden light poured across the old shop, catching on the polished faces of the clocks. Henry stood by the window, holding a cup of coffee, waiting. His heart beat a little faster than usual, though he couldn't quite explain why. Just before noon, the familiar chime of the doorbell filled the air. The boy walked in, his eyes bright with curiosity. "Sir, did you fix it?" he asked eagerly. Henry smiled. "I did." He reached under the counter and placed the silver pocket watch, now gleaming like new, onto the glass. The boy's eyes widened as he saw the smooth ticking hands. "It works again," he said, his voice breaking into pure wonder. Henry nodded slowly. "It does, and there's something I think you should know." He handed over the small note he had written the night before. The boy unfolded it, reading silently. When he reached the end, his gaze lifted, confused but thoughtful. "My dad made this watch?" he asked softly. Henry hesitated, then said, "Yes, many years ago. I was the one who helped him craft it. He was a good man, patient, curious, and full of life." The boy smiled faintly. "That sounds like him." Henry looked at him with misty eyes. "You look like him, too." A long silence filled the room, not uncomfortable, but heavy with realization. The boy didn't fully understand, not yet, but something in his heart recognized the truth. He clutched the watch gently, as though it were more than an object, as though it carried pieces of stories he'd never known. "Thank you, sir," he whispered. Henry's voice trembled. "Thank you for bringing it home." As the boy left, the little bell above the door chimed again, a soft sound that lingered in the still air. Henry turned toward the wall of ticking clocks and let out a deep breath, one that carried both sorrow and gratitude. For the first time in years, time no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a gift. That evening, Henry stayed in the shop long after sunset. The streets outside had grown quiet, and the golden glow from his lamp painted soft halos across the shelves. The ticking of the clocks blended into a gentle rhythm, a sound that once reminded him of loneliness, but now felt like life itself. He picked up one of the old pocket watches from the wall, one that had been sitting there for years, unwound, forgotten. He wound it gently and listened as it began to tick again. The steady sound made him smile. "Every second counts," he whispered. "Even the ones we think we've lost." He sat down by the counter and looked at the empty chair across from him, the one where his son had once sat, legs swinging as he watched his father work. For years, that memory had hurt, but tonight, it brought warmth. Henry realized something powerful. Gratitude doesn't erase pain. It gives it purpose. All the years of regret, the silence, the loneliness, they had shaped the man he was now, and if not for that, he might never have understood the beauty of one small moment. A boy returning with a broken watch, unknowingly mending a broken heart. He closed his eyes and let the feeling wash over him. Peace, quiet, and a strange, healing gratitude. The next morning, the shop window caught the sunrise, glinting across the old wooden sign, "Henry's Timepieces, since 1968. People walking by glanced in and smiled at the sight of the old man inside, working with focus and care. He was no longer waiting for customers or for time to bring back what was lost. He was simply thankful for the moments, for the memories, for the ticking that meant life was still moving forward. As the first customer of the day opened the door, the little bell above chimed, clear and bright. Henry looked up, smiled warmly, and said, "Welcome. Time's a precious thing. Let's make sure yours keeps running." And for the first time in a long while, his heart felt completely whole. Moral of the story: gratitude doesn't change the past, It changes how we see it.